Hello, today we're going to talk about rational numbers, what they are, and how to go from one form of rational numbers to another form of rational numbers. First of all, what they are. Rational numbers are numbers that show you part of a whole. There's actually three types of rational numbers that we're going to talk about. The first being a fraction. Fractions we've been working with for quite some time this year, so we should be pretty comfortable with fractions. The second form of rational numbers, a decimal. And then lastly, a percent. For example, we have a rectangle that's been divided into 10 equal pieces, and 3 of those 10 are shaded. As a fraction, to show the shaded region, you would write 3 over 10. Same picture, but now as a decimal, it would be 0.3 or 3/10. And as far as the percent, 30%. Now, how to go from one form of a rational number to another. In this case, a fraction to a decimal. There's really only one step, and that is to take the numerator and divide it by the denominator. So we have a fraction 1/3, and we are being asked to change it to a decimal. You're going to take the numerator and divide it by the denominator. Well, obviously 3 cannot go into 1, so you will add your decimal point. Bring it straight up, add a 0, and now you can divide. 3 goes into 10 3 times. I'm going to subtract, add a placeholder or a 0, bring it straight down, and continue dividing. Now what you'll notice is that we end up getting the same number every time we divide. And that number is 10. We're getting the same or repeating the same remainder. That is why 1/3 actually changes into something called a repeating decimal. 0.3 repeating. Repeating decimal, as I said before, is a decimal that continues on. There's a pattern. It never ends. While a terminating decimal, that's a decimal that will end at some point. Now, a decimal to a percent. This transition is a little bit smoother. There's only one thing you have to do, and that is to move the decimal point back 2 times. Yes, you always move the decimal point back 2 times. It does not matter where the decimal point is at originally. It will always be moved back twice in order to change to a percent. So, for example, 1.24, we see where the decimal point is. We'll move it back twice. So now 1.24 is equivalent to, or changes to, 124%. Here we have 1/1000. Doesn't really matter. You still move the decimal point back twice. You end up with 0.1%. Remember the repeating decimal from before, 0.3 repeating? Still the same process. You're going to move the decimal point back twice. However, the difference is instead of adding a 0 for your placeholder, you must remember that the 3 is what's repeating. So you add a 3. So 0.3 repeating is equivalent to about 33%. It is possible to have a percent that will be greater than 100, such as 124%, and also less than 1, such as 0.1%. A percent to a fraction. Basically, you have to remember the vocabulary, and that means what the word percent means. Percent means per 100, or some number out of 100. So whenever you have a fraction with the number 100 in the denominator, that is a percent. That is some number out of 100. So if I gave you 14% and asked you to change this to a fraction, hopefully we would remember what the word percent means. Per 100. In this case, it is 14 out of 100. Of course, we're going to reduce this by 2. So we'll have 7 over 50 as our fraction equivalent to 14%. Now, a decimal to a fraction. This one, there's two things to remember. You have to notice that the numbers in the decimal, they're going to make up your numerator. While the ending or the last place value, that's where your denominator is going to come from. So an example, 2.8. If you look at this problem, the numbers 2 and 8 are actually in the decimal. That means 28 is going to be my numerator. If you also look at the decimal, it ends in the tenths place value. So since it ends in the tenths, your denominator will be 10. And now, like always, whenever you're dealing with fractions, you always reduce at the end. 10 goes into 28 2 times with 8 left over. Hopefully we know that 8 over 10 would reduce to 4/5.